Well, hello. So this will feel like a bit odd because in my last video, I had a different haircut, no beard, and I was slightly more tanned. But things have moved on, time's moved on, and we wanted to give you an update on DB pension transfer work and some important changes that happened in October 2021. But also, having reviewed the videos, we wanted to make a few small adjustments. So hopefully you may have seen the old third video, why consider a DB pension transfer, but that you'll find this one a little more updated, a little more relevant, and equally as useful. So in video 2, we talked about the facets or the different attributes of a defined benefit pension and a defined contribution pension. And we were using a book, so we've moved on with technology. So on the left-hand side of the page was DB pensions, and on the right-hand side of the page was DC, or defined contribution pensions. And what I want you to keep in mind or review with that video is we're now talking about why it's possible to transfer from a DB pension into a DC pension, and what conditions would need to be met. We'll call those threshold conditions. What conditions need to be met for you to be able to have a transfer? So remind you of some of the basics. So the first thing to remember is that if your DB pension cash equivalent transfer value is worth more than £30,000, you are now legally required to take advice. And you should seek that from a pension transfer specialist and somebody who holds current DB pension transfer permissions. A little word on scams, which we thought we'd involve here. If you are being promised that you can access more than 25% of your tax-free cash, or you're being invited to invest in an unregulated collective investment scheme, a UCITS, they are indications of a pension scam. They are indications of people trying to move your money to a place where the money is not regulated or you are moving it offshore. You should not move ahead with a pension transfer if you feel that either of those things have been promised to you. Notably, pension schemes, when they are doing their due diligence for somebody who wishes to transfer, will now often do a questionnaire about that, or a survey, or even an interview. And you should be prepared as a customer to know that you are going to be asked those questions. So, can't access more than 25% tax-free cash in a regulated pension, and nobody should promise that you are. And you cannot access your pension earlier than the earliest possible retirement age, which for a DC pension is currently 55. So you should not be able to access money from your pension before 55, and that will soon be moving to age 57 when it goes 10 years before state retirement. State retirement age. So as the state pension moves up in age to when you get it, the personal pension, the DC pension pot, the lump sum plan that you've got, that's retirement age, earliest pension access age will change as well. So just wanted to remind you of those things. So why do some people choose a DB pension transfer? Well, the word that you will most often come across is flexibility. And that is a word that the regulator, the Financial Conduct Authority, don't actually like. And I agree with them, because flexibility is just this catch-all word that tells you or tells me nothing about what you actually want to do. What we do as pension transfer specialists is assess how best to meet your retirement goals. So when you're thinking about a DB pension transfer and retirement, you should be thinking about what goals you want to achieve in retirement. Now, we've noticed that retirement attitudes are changing. So in video 3, last time I gave an example, and I'm going to repeat a similar example. Lots of people now don't wish to retire fully at a given age. So years and years ago, you used to work for one company all of your life, you'd hit 65, you get a retirement party, you your retirement cake, everybody would get together, you'd all go out for a drink, you'd get a, you know, handshake and a watch, and you would retire. And then the next day, you would not be at work, and you'd have nothing necessarily to do. Most people these days would like a little more leisure time, but either don't want to stop work completely, or they want to pursue other interests. And so retirement attitudes are changing. And this is quite often one of the reasons why people will consider whether a DB pension transfer would be suitable. You may want to take some income from your pension and not all of the income all in one go. If you want to retire earlier than if you remember over here, the nominated retirement or the normal retirement age, which for most schemes is either 60 or 65, then you can do so here, but you will normally be penalised for the income that you are taking. In other words, and I'll put that in context, if your scheme income is £10,000 per annum at 65 and you want to retire at 58, just a random age that I've picked, if you want to retire at 58, then you're going to get your income for 7 more years. But you will not get £10,000 per annum. What you are likely to get is the £10,000 per annum reduced by a factor, and every scheme is different, but roughly somewhere around 5% per annum. So 7 times 5 years, or 5%, 7 years, 5%, a reduction on your £10,000 of 35%. So if you were then only entitled to, and I haven't done the exact maths, but if you're then only entitled to £7,000 per annum from age 58, that's what your income would be based on. So there will be a reduction there. And so you can retire early from the scheme, but it usually comes with a reduction in your income because it's being paid for longer. Some people therefore think that if the value of my pension is better by transferring it so that I can take income at a higher level for a longer or different period of time, or I can vary my income according to when I'm working and when I'm not working, either part-time or in a different job, then lots of people will consider a pension transfer. Now, I'm not going to be able to tell you about all the reasons why, but what I want to impress upon you today is that you must have thought about your retirement plans. You need to have thought carefully about what that looks like for you. The FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority, invite us and you to think carefully about what they are and to plan to have at least a minimum income requirement. In other words, what do I need every month to pay my bills, to put food on the table, and probably to meet rising prices. And it's good that I'm doing these videos right now. Inflation, as I'm speaking, in the UK is currently over 10%, so prices are rising faster than they have in 15 plus years, and people are feeling the pinch. Some DB pensions, most DB pensions, have inflation protection to a degree. They might not have 10% inflation protection, most of them have got up to 5% inflation protection, but your guaranteed income in retirement is inflation protected to a degree. So you need to think about that, and we need to help you consider what's best for you. In response to considering a DB pension transfer, we start from a position that it is likely not to be suitable. So in other words, for the vast majority of people, leaving your pension with your DB pension provider, taking the fixed guaranteed benefits for life is important. One of the other reasons that people move a DB pension is for death benefits. And there is a distinction here that I want to just briefly cover off for you. So if you remember our split DB, DC, over here in the DC pot, it's 100% of the pot. And it can be passed on to spouse, children, you can give it to Joe down the road, it's whoever you want. However, if the pot is 0, in other words, you have spent it all, then they get 100% of nothing. And that's really important to remember. Here, they are fixed. It's usually 50% or 67%. So it's a half or 2/3, effectively. And sometimes there is a children's pension of or up to age 23. But if you come to us for advice, we would look at those benefits and tell you what they are. So these benefits never run out. They're there for as long as you or your spouse are alive, and the children's pensions are there until they're old enough, effectively, to be financially independent. So there is flexibility and there is difference, and we would analyse which one is more appropriate for you. So there are other reasons that people look at DB pensions, but they're two of the most common. Some people will look to try and pay off their debt, pay down their mortgage, to allow them to have more money every month. So there are a myriad of reasons. But what we do is take your specific reasons, and we invite you to give those some really detailed thought in the process. And then we analyse whether your retirement objectives can be met in your DB pension scheme, or whether they can generally only be met or best met by effecting a DB pension transfer. So that's why people consider it. What drives that transfer advice is something called a cash equivalent transfer value, CETV for short. The CETV is generated by a DB pension provider based on how much money they have to put into a pot to provide you with your income in retirement. So in our example earlier on, £10,000 for income that you'll require. Let's say you're going to live for 40 years. They need to work out that they need to give you an inflation-linked income for 40 years. And they have some clever people who look at all sorts of mortality rates and morbidity rates and inflation assumptions, and where the money is invested for the pension scheme, for the DB pension scheme, and they work out what this pot of money is that will provide you with the income. Then they look at how close you are to retirement, and they calculate what that pot can be discounted back to, because if you transfer it, they're expecting that you may get some growth in the DC pot. So how many years have you got left until that pension is needed? And they discount it proportionally. Now, lots of people have noticed that CETVs have gone down quite a lot in the current environment, and rightly so, because CETVs, and part of the calculation that they do, is based on underlying gilt yields, so interest rates and fixed government investments. So gilt yields is the thing, the technical thing, but to give you a flavour as a person who may not look at the technicalities in that much detail, broadly, when interest rates or fixed interest investment rates go up, CETVs generally come down. And so that's what's been happening. So people are getting less value, and that is a factor when considering whether a transfer is suitable or not, the value of the CETV. So that's a quick whistle-stop tour of why some people consider a DB pension transfer. There are a couple of other things that I want you to know, and as you can see, if you've watched the other video, I'll have covered some of the same things off, but I don't plan to cover them all off exactly, because that other video will still be there for you to look at. The charges and the way we pay for advice has changed. And this is designed specifically to be a barrier to service for some people who would otherwise just consider it because it doesn't cost them any money. The charges are the same to have your DB pension analysed and to decide whether a transfer is suitable or unsuitable. In other words, leave it where it is. The price is the same. It's a fixed cost. So you could go through this whole piece of work, and my recommendation could be, and I'll try not to link this to Brexit, though some people will think about it, is to remain in the scheme. Okay? That, if we tell you to remain in the scheme, is the best outcome. But I am legally required now to charge you the same amount of money whether you transfer or not, or whether I recommend a transfer or not. And so I want you to just be really clear before you engage with us that you would be paying that, and the outcome could be stay where you are. And often is stay where you are. That shouldn't dissuade you, because if you feel you need advice, you should be willing and prepared to pay for advice. The other thing that we don't deal with, and we're really clear about this, is we don't deal with an insistent client. So if I recommend you remain in the scheme, I will not then take your instruction to disregard my advice and transfer your pension anyway. I don't know that there are many people out there these days who would, and I appreciate that some people are very technically minded and understand these things and might feel a bit upset that they cannot do what they want to do with their pension. I totally understand that. We will not be the person for you. So we will wish you well if that's the case. But for most of you, you're going to watch these videos, understand the pensions better, stay where you are. Some of you are going to watch the videos, feel like you want to explore the options, and you have two choices. So you can have something called abridged advice, and I'm just going to briefly explain that, which is a lesser cost. And there are two outcomes that I can give you legally, and that is remain in the scheme, or it is unclear whether a transfer would be suitable. So remain in the scheme, or it's unclear. That is the only two outcomes I'm allowed to give you for abridged advice. And the reason that it is unclear is because we have not done a TVC and a proper full cash flow, and we haven't analysed the scheme in detail. So we've done some clear objective modelling and other things that are required, and if you want abridged advice, come and talk to us and we'll give you all of the detail about what we can and we can't do. But it's a lesser cost, and it's usually, in my opinion, it's for those people who wish to know that they want to stay in the scheme, but they want to know that that scheme will meet their retirement income needs. So they're going to have enough money in retirement between their pots. And they also want an idea of how best to take their retirement income. And part of that is analysing their scheme. And my advice is to remain in the scheme. Some people feel like they've got the objectives to transfer, but would like to just take it in stages. If you take abridged advice, you can then move on to full advice, and you will not pay both charges. In other words, we will deduct the cost of abridged advice against the full advice charge. And obviously I'm not telling you what the full advice and abridged advice charges on here, because they're subject to inflationary pressures, insurance pressures and other things that will go on that will change the cost over time, and I'd like these videos to last a little bit longer, like the last ones have. So, in the full advice, we do something called a TVC, a transfer value comparator. We analyse the scheme and all its aspects. We provide a full and comprehensive cash flow model. We do something we quite like, it's called a Monte Carlo. It comes from the phrase Monte Carlo or bust. So we try and break your pension. We look at 1,000 different investment scenarios and see how many of them remain above zero by the time you get to a specific age. And we usually cash flow now to 99. So when we make a recommendation to transfer, we feel fairly confident, very confident that you should not only meet your objectives, but that the money will last well into retirement, all the way to when you've passed away and even leave a legacy. If it doesn't, then we will tell you why we are worried about it or why it doesn't last forever. We will put that all in writing for you. So that's why some people consider a DB pension transfer. If it's for you, please come and engage with us. If it's not for you, thanks for listening, and hopefully you've found it useful and informative and helped you feel reassured as to where you're going to go with your retirement plans.